Hello, folks. Welcome, welcome. Usually try to wait a minute or two so people can get to where they're coming from. I know a lot of coaches are wrapping up that morning session, so we'll give them a couple to come in. And in the meantime, would love to hear where everybody's from. Always one of my favorite parts of the episode is for you guys to blow up the chat. Usually have a pretty worldly crew, so go ahead and send the messages in, folks. Would love to see where you're from. Chicago, welcome. Rochester, love it. Breckenridge, welcome. I'm in Golden, so not too far away. Spokane, heck yeah.
Alex, you're
Oh.
kidding. You're not in Australia. I know that's not true. You're on the East Coast. Don't fib us.
That's awesome.
Hey, Rachel.
Welcome to the AI note takers. Always good to have you guys. Cool. Yeah, we do have a worldly
Josie.
crew.
Ha. Yep. Alex admits it now. He's in Virginia.
A fibber.
I know. You
It's good to
can't
have them.
trust an Aussie.
Welcome from Kosovo. Heck yeah.
Dang.
I love it. Cool, folks. Well, we're going to get going. Unwracked is a live conversation series from Bridge Athletic. Bridge provides coaching tools to world renowned organizations like the Atlanta Falcons, Naval Special Warfare, University of Arizona, and Westside Barbell. They provide those very same tools for coaches like me and you to use in our communities to deepen the training experience. Unwracked is a free educational series Bridge puts on to break down the training systems, methods, and philosophies that drive performance at the highest level. Each episode takes you inside a specific approach, how it's built, how it's applied, and how it evolves under real world conditions. The views expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the positions of Bridge Athletic or our partners. Today's guest is a true pioneer in her field. Having walked the walk as a lieutenant in the fire service, her practical experience, equipped with her ability to learn how to talk the talk of performance as well, is second to none. She's pursuing her PhD in health and human performance. She's worked thousands of hours with athletes, and she's an all around badass. Annette Zapp, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Of course. Yeah, I'm stoked to have you. And I know we're gonna really talk about, the theme of the episode being operational demands of firefighting, but I think it's a really important for us to kind of get to know you a little bit first because you have such a wild, incredible backstory. And I'd love to start the conversation just kind of learning about how you got into firefighting and, in particular, realizing when you wanted to become a coach for firefighters and get more involved in the research side of things.
That is a really great question. And I just realized it looks like I have a fuzzy rabbit in front
Yeah.
of me.
I like
So,
it.
welcome to the show, my fuzzy rabbit microphone. So, I kind of always use the same elevator speech, which is I am a biochemist by degree. I'm a strength and conditioning coach and a sports nutritionist by credential. I'm a firefighter by trade, and I'm a business owner by choice. And the reason I'm a business owner is that once I got into the fire service, uh, you know, once you find what breaks your heart, that's when you find your purpose. And so after I got my degree, it's embarrassing to admit, but I got my master's in 1994. Yes, some of our listeners were not born in 1994, but I walked out of academia and I didn't think I would ever walk back in. And with a degree in biochemistry, I just had these aspirations of doing all of these wonderful things. And what I really realized is that I enjoyed doing the coaching a lot. I'd been doing that part time as a university student. And so I kind of went all in on the personal training and the group exercise. Off camera, Cooper and I were talking about I was one of the first Concept 2 indoor rowing instructors, which is wild.
Pretty cool.
I know, which kind of plays into my story, interestingly enough. But I moved from South Dakota to Chicago because I was looking for kind of more of a sort of a mecca of health and fitness, and Chicago seemed to be the place to go. I didn't really put too much thought into it. I probably should have put a lot more thought into it, but it worked out really well. I moved to Chicago. I started working at a hospital-based wellness center, and I was working for Johnny G in the spinning program. So I was traveling all over the country teaching indoor cycling to gyms, and I actually got to visit a couple military installations. I got to train the Secret Service, which is crazy to
Nice.
think
That is
about.
crazy.
I know, wild. But I was really successful and I was making a ton of money, and I had health insurance, but it was super, super expensive, and I actually had a medical emergency. And I had to make decisions based on my medical care on how much things were going to cost. And I just realized that even though this was a lucrative business to be in, it wasn't a very stable business. And
Hmm.
so I started to look for more of I call it a big girl job. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but there were firefighters coming into my fitness center, and they were amazing, really cool people. And they kept talking about what a great job it was. Now, they forgot to tell me about the shortcomings of the job, but they told me about the great hours, the good pay, time off. It's like a team sport. You get to look cool driving $1 million apparatus. I was sold. So I went all in, and I got my EMT and my paramedic, and I got hired relatively quickly. And so in 2004, I raised the right hand. I took the oath, and I worked for a small fire protection district outside of Chicago for exactly 20 years to the day.
So cool. So cool. I'd love to hear more about kind of the dark side elements, so to speak. Like, I wonder, how many people have like direct contact with like someone who has so much experience in the fire service. So like, I want to hear the good, but I want to hear, some of the bad too. Like what really is the reality of the day-to-day life of someone.
Yeah, so if you ever ask a firefighter about their job, you will hear the same thing. I always say it's different circuses, same clowns. At every single fire agency, it's like this maybe 10 or 12 different personalities, but you find them at every agency. But when you
Mm.
ask them about their job, they always say, best job in the world. And it is absolutely 100% true. It's the best job in the world. But I personally wasn't prepared for the sleep deprivation. Of course,
Hmm.
I knew I would be going on calls overnight, and I was aware that I would be seeing things that, were not probably, people just aren't used to seeing what you see when you're a first responder. So I was aware of it, but I didn't understand how those things would play together. So
Mm.
the sleep deprivation, the exposure to trauma. Also, I will pull no punches on this. I wasn't a particularly emotionally mature person. I get it was partially like when I grew up, partially my family dynamic, but I didn't have a lot of ability to uh, resolve conflict. And
Mm.
so it just got, for me personally, it got really, really dark. And what I learned, um, luckily, I learned it before something terrible happened to me. But some of the things that take the lives of our firefighters, you would think, oh my gosh, falling through a roof or um, making a big rescue. But actually, one of the things that kills more firefighters than almost anything else is suicide. And
Hmm.
so when you think about this population, a lot of times we're like tactical athletes. Everyone wants to say tactical athletes, but really what we have to think about is these are just general population people who want to be helpers. They raise their hand and they just are general population that have a really, really, really hard job. And they do that job under conditions of sleep deprivation. And I guess just not ideal conditions all the time. So for
Yep.
me, it was a big eye opener because the only thing that I ever knew was the fire trucks speeding past, the lights and the sirens, and helping people on their worst day. That's the only thing I knew. I wasn't
Hmm.
prepared for everything else.
Got it. Yeah, I mean it's obviously an intense role, and if you look at the broader tactical populations, it really is true. I think what you're saying, like these are Gen Pop people, folks, that are just like in the face of these traumatic things day in and day out, and losing sleep, which nutrition's not great, and so on and so forth, and I think that plays nicely into kind of the diving into some of the deeper elements of, the firefighting culture, and getting us like really triangulated on that, before we dive into the finer details. So, I want to explore, I guess, really like the calculus of the culture, right? Where are we right now? How do we get here? And like, where are we trying to go in the future?
That is such a great question because the job, even in the amount of time that I did the job, 20 years, it really changed a lot. And so we like to say it's a pretty common term in the fire service. The United States Fire Service, 200 years of culture unimpeded by progress. And so for a lot of years, the fire service was a pretty, I won't say a cushy job, that's not the right explanation, but you might go to your job and respond to a couple of calls. And maybe those jobs are fires, but primarily you were not particularly busy, and the jobs that you were going on were fires. Thanks to fire prevention principles, we actually go on very few, I shouldn't say very few, but far fewer fires than ever before. And we're primarily going on EMS calls. And so, or calls for other types of rescue. And so at most agencies, the call volume has expanded greatly, whereas the manpower, woman power, the amount of apparatus, the amount of resources has actually either stayed the same or gotten smaller. So I'll use my agency for an example. I mentioned that it was a small agency, but when I got hired, we had 105 firefighters. And then about 10 years into my career, there were some big budget cuts, and we actually went down to 87 firefighters through attrition. So nobody lost their job, but we lost two rigs and whatever math is hard, 18 firefighters or however many that is. And so the fire service is exceptionally busy, not only with calls, but they have a lot more in terms of paperwork, in
Mm.
terms of reporting requirements, in terms of responding to all manner of different calls that maybe never would have been on our radar before. So that whole doing more with less is really, really, really apparent in the fire
Mm.
service.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, and so is it sounds like there's kind of like a thick layer of bureaucracy that got added, which, I'm sure having experienced, elements of that, like in addition to, going out on a crazy call and all that, to have to come back and do all this like grueling paperwork, and all those things could not be a more jarring experience. And so I'm curious, hearing you say all that stuff, like have the problems firefighters faced from like a performance standpoint like really changed and evolved over the last, I would say, I don't know, I guess since you've been in?
Another interesting question. Maybe not so much since I started, but let's look back, say, in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
The population of the country was much more fit because they were much more active.
Mm-hmm.
Kids had recess and gym class. Moms, I know my mom would say, like, go outside and play and don't come home until the streetlights come on, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so the fitness levels, I believe, of the people coming into the fire service were more suited to the job than potentially they are at this point. And so if I look now, okay, so 70s, 80s, 90s, let's just put that aside because I don't have personal experience. When we look in terms of when I was in the fire service, I would say that the performance requirements maintained or were very similar, but sometimes the equipment that we use, the metamorphosis of the equipment, which is supposed to make our job easier, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
made our job harder. So, for example, we had it's actually quite a rare type of air pack that we had at my agency, but it was a wireframe harness, which is extremely, extremely light. And in terms of
Interesting.
mobility, pretty easy to move in. And so we updated our air packs not too long before I stopped working, and they were several, several pounds heavier. They had a much thicker waistband, so mobility was diminished. And again, just those few pounds of weight on your back make a big difference. And sometimes I wonder, like, did anyone think this through thoroughly in terms of a performance standpoint before designing this equipment, and then ultimately agencies purchasing the equipment?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's so interesting. Yeah, and I know you have, some slides you kind of want to go over today, and that will start to really dive into, how you think about the framework for starting to train these folks. So go ahead and pull those up. And I think, it'll be really nice to see these. One, because, I've worked with maybe one firefighter in my career, and it was very much like he was at the gate about to go into, I guess, what is it, fire school?
Uh-huh.
And so, like, what I know, I think is a drop, and what you have to share is an ocean. So please, yeah, dive in.
Okay, so I don't like to kill people with PowerPoints, but also I've learned at my age, I think I'm both autistic and ADHD, and so it just helps me to keep on track.
I love it.
So, Cooper already mentioned this, but I always like to disclose this as well. I am a business owner. I'm also a PhD student at Oklahoma State University with the Dr. J. Dawes, just one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. And I'm currently embedded with a large metropolitan agency in Oklahoma. So it is it is my great honor to be able to have such a cool grad assistantship and hopefully I'm providing value to that agency. So that's where we are. So in the fire service, as in police and in the military, we use the term called bluff. Cooper's probably familiar with it. Maybe some of the coaches on the call are not, but bluff is bottom line up front. So tell me all of the important stuff. Don't bore me with the details. Tell me all the important stuff. And that's what I'm going to do with you today. And so I already mentioned it. Firefighters are from the general population, and the general population is getting more and more increasingly unfit year by year. And so the military and police and fire are all pulling their candidates from the same fishing pond, which is becoming less fit overall. So keep that in mind. There's also the concept of the tactical athlete. Now, I'm going to give a big nod to Dr. Dawes and also Mark Stevenson, who were at the NSCA when this kind of whole concept of the tactical athlete came about. But, we've had a ton of conversations about that, Dr. Dawes and I. And he's like, AZ, we never meant to say they were athletes. What we meant to say was they should be training like athletes and they should have the recovery modalities and the nutrition and all of those things, that like an athlete would have. And so my friend Vanessa actually has a really good, she poses the question. She says, are these tactical athletes or are they just really high risk general population? And I would vote with Vanessa, super high
Me
risk general
too.
population. These are people, again, who want to do good for other people. They raise their right hand and they just do really, really freaking hard jobs under really bad conditions. With this population, for the most part, fire service, we're not talking tip of the spear fitness. We're talking sometimes just health is a challenge. And so, you know, there's a paper, I wish I would have actually put the citation on here, but there was a paper not too long ago that said about 70% of firefighters don't even get the minimum exercise recommended by ACSM, not even the minimum. So we're not talking tip of the spear. We're talking, holy moly, these people just need to get some exercise training.
Hmm.
Yeah, the other thing too, we have to be really cognizant and careful for. Many agencies have pretty comprehensive medical screening. Many agencies have no medical screening. And then there's, the agencies that meet somewhere in the middle. But many of these firefighters may have underlying health conditions that, even when really, really carefully screened, are hidden. And so I like to give the example South Metro, which is in kind of your neck of the woods, Cooper, in
Hmm.
Colorado. They have a really, really elite human performance optimization team. They have their own doctor, they have physical therapists, ATs, they have dietitian, strength coaches, mental health, they have it all. And so a few years ago, they started thinking like, what else can we do in terms of screening for cardiac disease? And so they did a pilot study where they provided cardiac CTs. So it's pretty typical in the fire service, EKGs, stress EKGs, calcium scores, all of those things are pretty typical, but no one at the time was doing cardiac CTs. And so They had a group, I believe it was 20 people initially, and a few of those people they screened out as high risk. So either they had a family member who died of heart disease, they had symptoms, signs and symptoms themselves, complaints of shortness of breath, things like that. But the balance of that small pilot study, those people had no risk factors, no complaints, and had also just been cleared through an EKG and a calcium score. Like, you are good to go. And they actually found pretty heavy underlying cardiac disease in a couple of these patients.
Yeah.
And so it's the soft plaque that you can't see on the calcium score. And so, in fact, a couple of these patients actually would have more than likely been a cardiac arrest in a short amount of time. So, in terms of underlying disease, we just always have to consider that, because even though they're being screened, they are exposed to so many things and the sleep deprivation. So we know sleep deprivation is correlated with about 15 of the top mortality risks, including cancer, which kills a lot of our firefighters, including cardiovascular disease, including
Mhm.
suicide. So we have to keep that in mind. And then the other thing that we need to consider is when we're working with firefighters, we have to consider the requirements of their engine or their VO2 max. Obviously, with VO2 max, I can't think of an example where more wouldn't be better just for a human. But in firefighters, we have to consider, like, maybe with a low VO2 max, maybe you can get that job done, but at what physiological cost to yourself? And so we have to really focus on big engine. Then we have to think about the muscle. So there's quite a bit of research on the fact that lower body strength, upper body strength, and power are important for firefighter performance. And also overall endurance is important, muscular endurance. And so we need to kind of be able to train them through the gamut of strength, power, endurance, et cetera, et cetera. Mobility and stability, as you probably can guess, lots of injuries in this job, and simply being able to maintain the ability to not only say deadlift a patient off the floor, but own the mobility to do that in a good position is super, super important. And then I need to give a nod too to body composition.
Mm.
Body composition, which plays into our VO2 max, which plays into our muscle quality, but also the biggest predictor of an injury is a previous injury. But poor body composition is also a huge predictor of injury. So we need to take all of those things into consideration in a population where 70% of them simply aren't getting enough exercise.
Well, I have one question
Yeah.
on that is the injuries and such. I know, having worked with a ton of Gen Pop in my time, for sure, that low back pain, just general low back pain, general shoulder pain, general knee pain. I'd be curious though, like, I'm sure all that's there, but what are some of the things that are kind of unique to this population that like from an injury perspective?
It is so funny that you said low back, shoulder, and knee, because in that order are the injuries that firefighters
Yep.
experience. And
Same
I
same with
and
Marines, same with like Army, Navy. It's all the same.
so the only one that I'm going to add that I see a lot is elbow tendonitis and tendinopathy, and it's
Interesting.
probably from wearing gloves that don't fit, manipulating knobs and buttons and things like that. But
Interesting.
I really wish I'd have put this slide on, but I believe it's Mike Boyle's joint by joint, the
Hmm. Hmm.
picture that he has. We need ankle mobility, hip mobility, T-spine mobility.
Yep.
Um, we layer those areas that are already needing to be mobile and probably aren't as mobile as they should be. Then we put on these safety toe boots, which have super high ankle shanks or whatever you call it. So your
Hmm.
ankles can't move. We have the turnout gear, which keeps our hips from moving and our T-spine from moving. Then we put the air pack on that makes sure it's almost like wearing a cast, an upper body
Hmm.
cast. And so when we don't have the requisite mobility in joints that should move, then our poor little knees and low back and shoulders suffer.
Interesting. And yeah, I guess interesting point about the gear. right? Like,
Uh-huh.
and the external constraint that that places you under already, like whatever mobility you have is being reduced significantly. So on top of that, like, you're, if you have shitty joints, like you are fucked.
Right.
So
And I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's one of the things that um, it's kind of one of my passion projects right now because there, I think it was in 2016, something like that. A paper came out that talked about how simply just putting on your gear took down your VO2 max and it diminished your strength, and having the gloves on diminished your grip strength. And the sort of punchline of that paper was practitioners should make sure that firefighters perform job task training in their gear. But what I think a lot of the fire service heard was we should be working out in our gear, like actually deadlifting and
oh
burpeeing
no.
and pull-ups. Well, and
Yeah,
the thing
yeah,
is, I
yeah.
try to be very, very transparent. There currently isn't any research that definitively says that's a bad idea. There's not any research that also says that's a great idea. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping to put on my horizon as far as research. I have some great guys at the agency that I'm working at that are actually very much fans of working out in their gear, but they're also fans of finding out what is the answer to that scientific question. So hopefully down the road we'll be doing that.
So
But
cool.
yeah, it is cool. But my philosophy is if your VO2 max diminishes by putting on your gear, then let's just get it as high as we absolutely can by doing things outside of your gear. And then you do need to be comfortable in it. And so let's then have you do job tasks instead of, burpees in your gear. Let's have you do search and rescue in your gear. Let's have you do ladder deployment. Let's have you do hose deployment in your gear. So that was a really good question, Cooper.
Cool. Yeah, continue on. I mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
I was
no,
very,
no
very
problem.
curious, and I will keep interrupting you. So,
No, that's fine. And I have to tell, before I go to these notes, I have to tell a funny story about I try very hard to use either photographs I've taken or
hmm.
photographs from a site called Unsplash because I think it's not cool to use people's copyrighted photos. And so I was looking on Unsplash one day I wanted specifically a female firefighter. So I just, put that in the search bar and this came up. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? This is a friend. She works for Windsor Severance Fire
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like,
There
this
she
is her
is.
picture.
Yeah.
So I put this in all of my presentations. Thanks. Shout out Jamie. So important things to note with programming for firefighters, time limitations. And you have to think about this on several different planes. The first one is if you are going to do a training session with them at 9 o'clock in the morning, there's a 95% chance you're going to show up at the firehouse and they're going to be on a call and they're not going to
Mm.
be back for 90 minutes. And so if you do get there and you do get a session started, you have to keep in mind, like, keep her moving. We're not going to be chit chatting. We're not going to be, stopping. We are just going to keep that session going. And then the other thing, as far as time limitations, we want to be able to harness their ability because many agencies not only uh, endorse working out on duty, many agencies require this. So it's great. So we want to have them working out on duty, but we want to make sure that the types of training that they're doing on duty isn't going to hinder them from a good response. And so, because I'm a data nerd and a research nerd, I will mention shout out to Katie Dennison and Mark Abel's lab. They've done quite a lot of work on this. What they found was that doing a heavy resistance training session wasn't too big of a deal in terms of response. So they did a heavy resistance training session, then they went on a simulated call, no big deal. Then they called it high intensity functional training, but in your head, you could just say like a CrossFit type workout.
Okay.
And when when the first responders did a CrossFit or high intensity functional training session and then subsequently went on a call, their air tanks lasted longer, their perceived exertion was higher, their power was lower. So there's all kinds of these bad things that happened. So some people might go, aha, I told you firefighters shouldn't do CrossFit. But the punchline to this is those firefighters that were more fatigued and went through their bottles slower also still performed way better than the dudes and dudettes that didn't work out at all. So, is it the absolute best type of training for on duty? Probably not, but it's another modality. If you enjoy that kind of stuff, do that kind of stuff because again, 70% of firefighters don't get enough exercise.
Yeah.
So we also have to deal with sleep deprivation and everything that goes with that. So sometimes auto regulation is something that can be very, very useful. Many of these firefighters have, whether they know it or not, have had traumatic brain injuries. So again, just something to keep in mind. And then we have to also keep in mind that these individuals have been exposed, at least in some level, to trauma. And so a trauma informed approach to training, trauma informed isn't my area of expertise. I am at the knowledge only level of trauma informed, but there are great people out there that present on this. Trace Toffner and Anna August and Becky Swan they're all athletic trainers that kind of present on this trauma informed care. And it's fantastic to just have an awareness level on that. I'm going to skip decision fatigue for 1 second. I'm going to go to culture. If you have an agency that has 50 fire stations and 3 shifts, you effectively have 150 different fire departments because the culture at each station on each shift is very different. And it's almost like all or nothing. So if you see one person from a shift and they're fit and they have their stuff together and they seem very much motivated and disciplined to train, generally the entire station is the same way, and vice versa is also true. And then I left decision fatigue for last because I do have a little story about decision fatigue. I recently became really frustrated because I wrote a program. I don't do customized programming for, well, let's be honest, for anyone. I don't do customized programming, but especially it's not necessary in the fire service. I want to teach you how to fish. And so I'm going to give a general program that's going to be pretty good for everyone. And then when you tell me, AZ, this exercise hurts my knee, then I'm going to teach you how to substitute confidently another exercise so you don't have to call me every time you need to substitute an exercise. You don't need me. I'm going to give you the confidence.
Yep.
So I gave this individual a program and he wrote me back and he said, I can't do this program because I don't have a treadmill. And I said, could you walk around the block instead? And he's like, I mean, I guess I could. And then another day went by and he's like, yeah, I still can't do this program because I only have 15-pound dumbbells. So as it turns out, he was trying to do the program at home, not at a commercial gym. And I was really frustrated. I was so frustrated that several of my friends got an earful about it. I was just bouncing it off them. And then I took a step back and I was like, oh, you know what though? First of all, he's not an exercise person. This doesn't come naturally to him. But the bigger piece of it is these men and women make life or death decisions X number of times per day. It's kind of like when you've been at the office all day and you go home and your husband or wife is like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. I have decision fatigue. I can't even tell you if I want a grilled cheese or a ham sandwich. I don't know. I think this happens in fire too. So these personnel, they're super smart, they're super competent, they're really brave. I mean, it takes a good amount of kahunas to walk into a 1,000-degree oven, but they don't want to think about, could I substitute jump roping for treadmilling? So decision fatigue is real.
Yeah, that cognitive load element is this. It's the same thing. I've seen it across all tactical athletes, like, and why it's so important to have like practitioners involved is
Hmm.
because the second they go to write their own workout, that's like 1,000 decisions they had to make in addition to, oh, hey, I just spent 4 hours doing like CQB or putting fires out, and like drills and stuff. And it's like, it it's worth it to give a level of white glove experience to these folks so that they can just get this element that is like so crucial to their job done. But like you said, it can't be not everyone can have their hand held every step of the process. And so, yeah, that teaching to fish element is good for their cognitive load too. in a way, because
Yes.
then they're never confused once they reach critical mass of getting really good at that. So I love what you're saying.
Absolutely. And there are those individuals that are simply looking for making the barrier so high. See, I can't get in shape because AZ didn't, tell me to step with my right foot instead of my left foot. But
Hmm.
it's not very common. And so again, I just try to use that, teach them how to fish. When I open up the app, when I show people how to use the app, the first thing I say is, we're never going to not do a training session. Listen, I hate burpees. I hate with a burning passion. I cannot tell you how much I hate burpees, but we cannot open up the app and go, oh, I see burpees on this training session, so I'm not doing that one, or I can't do this program. So we have to be able to have, it's much like taking your car in for an oil change. Like I could I could do the oil change, but then what do I do with the oil when I'm done? I have to find somewhere to get rid of it. It's easier for me to just take it to the shop, but I have to have that level of confidence and competence to at least get the oil change somehow. So the we have to be really practical with this population. And so the three things I really consider are safety, efficacy, and density. So safety, I 100% never, never, never do max testing with this population. If I'm doing research, we do isometric mid-thigh pull, but I am not doing your 1 rep max on a deadlift. I am not 1 rep or 3 rep maxing you on the squat. First of all, for me to do that with 1,100 people, literally impossible. And second of all, the letter would start like this: Dear Chief, it was a day like any other. And I was, 1 rep max testing Cooper on the squat. Oh, by the way, Cooper hasn't done a squat in 18 months, and now he's out on a back injury. So safety, safety is super important. Efficacy with all programming, right? We want to have effective programming, but especially in this population, uh, wasting time is they don't want to check a box. They want to make sure what they're doing is going to make a difference. And then the last thing that I use is density. And so Cooper and I chatted about this on the phone the other day. He had a better term for it, but I just used the word density. A collegiate coach would probably look at my programming and be absolutely horrified. Like, oh my gosh, you're not resting. This is not enough rest. This is the timing is wrong. The order is wrong. But with the exception of my main lifts, I am always putting other exercises in the resting. So let's say the main lift is the deadlift. So yes, we're going to rest, but probably only about a minute. Why? Well, because we want to get as much of that deadlifting done before they go on a call as possible. But the other thing is, conditions are not optimal in the fire service. And so you do need to be able to perform again. You can't really say like, sorry, chief, I got to rest another 3 to 5 minutes before I can lift another patient. So that's one of the reasons. And then the other reason is I need to sneak in mobility. I need to get those other body parts in. So I want as much bang for the buck as I possibly can in whatever amount of time that they can give me. And so that
I love
is
that.
it for the slides, Cooper.
Yeah. Well, I would love to dive deeper into that density element, and chat about like what that means, why that's important, because the in a separate episode, actually our first episode of Unracked was with Tom Barry from a gym out of Columbus, Ohio called Westside Barbell, and he
Nice.
talks a lot about tonnage,
Mhm.
in his training for professional athletes. And basically what that means, if okay, in 15 minutes, right, you could get X amount of trips done with the sled down and back, in this. If you are doing more trips, right, that's like more overall tonnage in that 15 minutes, right? And so these density elements and like volume load per minute and all these different metrics you can track, like why is that important? And like how can coaches start to think about density in their training? And I think this is important for all populations, folks. Like if we're talking about people who just are extremely high stress Gen Pop, this is going to apply to Gen Pop, right? But this is also going to apply to like athletes at the top of their game who need to be able to put more tonnage out than the guy they're going against or gal they're going against for the next hour, right on the field. So dive into that density element.
So I'm gonna circle back to it if it's okay.
Please.
Another one of my dudes says he's actually Wildland. Shout out to Austin. But Austin said, ideally in a perfect world, we would do our speed and agility first, and then we would, follow by this,
Mhm.
follow by that, endurance work at the end. And he's like, when you're at the bottom of a mountain, crawling over a tree or whatever, you had better be able to have your endurance, like tap into your endurance, in a order that maybe isn't as logical as it would be. So basically, he creates his workouts a little bit out of chaos. Now, I
Mhm.
don't go that far. Not that it's not a great idea. I do try to keep things a little bit more in a traditional order, but the biggest thing I have to keep reminding these firefighters about is that um, the fire service works in absolutes, not in relatives.
Mm.
Meaning, I am a larger woman, a larger size woman, but I am a smaller size firefighter. And so at 5'9" and 165 pounds, the gear that I have to wear, the hose that I have to carry, the tools that I have to carry is relatively far heavier for me than a lean 250-pound person. And so, again, it's because we work in absolutes, not relatives. I try to also get higher absolute work done in each training session. So that plays back into that lowering the rest, increasing the number of exercises, switching from, top of the body to bottom of the body to a mobility to maybe stick another mobility in there somewhere.
Mhm. Mhm.
But instead of resting, they are getting the advantage of increasing the overall tonnage, the overall workload for the entire session, thereby increasing the intensity without necessarily doing it in a way that's going to, again, make them unable to respond to a call coming up right afterwards. And Cooper, I'm the worst because the comments keep popping up and I'm like talking and then I look at a comment and I'm like, what was
That's
I
okay.
just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
saying?
We can
Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we're talking about kind of how we build out, like a session that is
Yeah,
revolved around density. And I think density, like, from what I gathered from what you told me is the absolute element here. There are a handful of like just if you cannot overcome this minimum threshold of like strength, power, endurance, speed, whatever it might be, right? It's a liability,
yeah,
right? And so we have to achieve these certain minimums, right? Obviously, if everybody could deadlift 1,000 pounds, run a 3 second 40-yard dash, and like have perfect body composition, we would have that, right? But instead of going maximal, we have to find like these minimum thresholds and exceed those, right?
yeah.
And then what we layer on top of that is, can you exceed that minimum threshold 20 times in a row and under fatigue, right? And so am I right? Am I wrong? Like what?
No, and you raise a good point. You're absolutely right. And you raise a good point. Every person on the team, quote unquote, has their specialty, but also everyone needs to be able to do the job. Because even in really large agencies, I'll go in moderately sized agencies,
Hmm.
you may be the driver one day, but that doesn't mean that you're not in the right hand seat as the officer the next day or riding backwards the day
Hmm.
after that. And so we need you to be a generalist in terms of, I was thinking about a decathlete. My favorite
Hmm.
decathlete is Ashton Eaton, by the way. Shout out to Ashton Eaton. But, um, you know, in the decathlon, You have to be a sprinter. You have to be able to run, I believe it's 1500. You have to be able to throw the shot put, do the hurdles. And you have to be able to perform all of those events pretty well in order to win. And so I could go in the decathlon, and let me tell you, I was not any longer, but I was a pretty good hurdler. But that's the only thing that I'm going to be able to pull a significant amount of points in the decathlon because I'm not good enough. I guess it would be heptathlon for women, but I'm just not good enough at the jumps. I'm not good enough at the
This is a
distance.
great way to point it out though, right? Because there's all these physical qualities you have to be excellent at, right? And
Right.
like you literally, it's like virtually impossible to be excellent at all of them until you get to that, like, like we're talking like 10 people on the planet that are competing with each
Right.
other for a gold medal, right? So you're
But
gonna
I
have
need
your
you to be
deficits. Yeah.
good enough. I need you to be good
Yes.
enough that if we have a straight stick truck and you have to climb 100-foot ladder, I need you to be good enough. You can still get off of that 100-foot ladder onto the roof and cut a hole for me. If you are cashed out, wasted after climbing up on the ladder, you're not any good to me. So I
Yeah.
need you to have just a good enough a concept of all of those attributes. And I think
Hmm.
that that's another reason why when I do my programming, which I think we're going to maybe go through a little bit later, but
Sure.
I always try to make it a bit of sort of choose your own adventure.
Hmm.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous because many people choose the adventure where they're most comfortable rather
Yeah.
than the adventure of this is what I need to work on. But I put it together in hopefully a modular way that allows them to, first of all, manage their time, but also manage their ability to hit on the things that are really important.
I love that. And I guess like one question I have before we go into the programming element is like, as someone who most recently in my career, high school football was where I was working, and there's a lot in NFL training that can inform us what to do with high schoolers. But at the end of the day, much like you're talking about, these are Gen Pop people that decided they wanted to play football. And so it's a wildly different approach, right? For the vast majority of them compared to what we would do at that elite level. But I do want to get an understanding kind of like, okay, well, if 70% aren't necessarily up to par, and it sounds like a lot of like what you do is getting that number to dwindle. But what does the top 5% look like? What jobs are they doing in the fire service? And like what can we learn from them?
I think that, okay, Cooper, I'm going to ask you to
Yeah,
ask me that question again in just 1 second because you
sure.
said something that was really important. And I always use the example. I wanted to be a supermodel. I really did, but I do not have the assets, the assets, right, to be a successful supermodel.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
can be sad about that. And I can say, it's not fair.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, Guess and Tom, whatever, Ford, and all of those modeling agencies are not going to hire me because I am not qualified. Now, when we look at getting into public safety in the military, let's leave the military off. When we look at getting in
Sure.
public safety, many times, almost always, there's some sort of a minimum standard test to get in. And very often there's never a minimum test to keep. There's not a fit for duty. And
Mhm.
so that's an entirely different conversation for today or than we were having today. But we what is really imperative in my opinion is getting people that are intrinsically motivated. And that speaks to it speaks to education. But it also speaks to this, and I'll tell this as a very fast story because it could take forever.
Sure.
As a young athlete, my parents were, we didn't have a ton of money. I grew up very poor. My parents were very busy. We were farmers, at least for a period of time. And so my parents were like, listen, little girl, time out. You can participate in one and only one sport. You have to pick what it is. We cannot be running you around year round. Pick one sport. So I picked
Mhm.
track and field. And I knew at the end of track and field season, I'm like, I have to stay in physical condition to be good at track and field again next year. But guess what I did? Zero, zilch, nada, nothing until track and field came around again. And then it was the same thing. I need to stay in shape. So then it moved into college. I ran track and field for a couple of years, wasn't very good. But once I was done with track and field, I'm like, I need to keep working out. I need to stay in shape. Guess what I did? Zero, zilch, nada. And so then I was self-aware to know I need something that's going to help me. And so I took a class. I took a weightlifting class. It was fantastic. I got done with the weightlifting class. I'm going to keep applying this stuff every single day. Guess what I did? Zero, zilch, nada. The punchline of this whole thing is I didn't start working out reliably on my own without someone holding a whip to my back until I became a group exercise instructor myself. And then I began teaching way too much group exercise. And then I actually now hate group exercise, and I have a home gym and I have discipline. All of this is to say I wasn't intrinsically motivated. I had to figure out what it took for me in order to be not doing zero zilch nada.
Mm-hmm.
That is my biggest lesson I need to teach to firefighters. How do we become self-aware enough to figure out how to be intrinsically motivated?
Love that. I love that. Yeah, because it's that everybody's lives are so different in terms of the calculus of what gets them
Yes.
to the starting point of that. In the first, probably have kids from really wealthy backgrounds. You probably have kids from, super poor backgrounds and like everything in between and like, what gets them to get to that point of intrinsic motivation. I'm curious, like, what you think some of the things that are common that work for a lot of people are.
Again, I think it just has to go back to that self-awareness. I think you have to take the really hard look at yourself,
Hmm.
self. What is it going to take? And for some people, buying a gym membership may be what it takes. For some people, paying a trainer for accountability. Now, those are the types of clients I don't enjoy having. I don't want to just be the accountability buddy, but for some people, that's what it takes. For some people, unfortunately, it takes a scare. I had a firefighter for years. Every year we would do his fitness eval. Every year I would have a serious and hard conversation with him. And every year he would say, yes, 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 I got it. I understand. But what it finally took was for him to have a scare during a training drill where he got short of breath, got a palpitations and so on and so forth. And that kind of like scared him straight. So
Mm.
the answer to your question is, Cooper, it's $1 million question and I don't know.
It's okay. It's okay. Answering it though, it gets us one bit closer, right? And in terms of the group think here. So I love that. Cool. Well, I do want to dive into the programming elements, right? And like, kind of take a look under the hood a little bit, so to speak. So feel free to pull up what you have there. Obviously folks like I work on behalf of Bridge. Annette uses Bridge. But don't look any deeper into it than that, folks. We're not trying to push product here. We're trying to look at programs.
Well, Cooper, I thought that I would be able to do this, but let's see if I actually can do this. Nope, that's the other presentation. It's like my first day doing a Zoom. Remember in COVID, everyone was like, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
I do. It's funny too. It still happens in like every meeting, even though we've all been using this stuff for half a decade now.
Ooh, I might have it. Cooper, are you seeing my screen?
I'm seeing your screen.
Oh, this is
Dive in.
fabulous. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, if you are a collegiate or professional, man, even a high school strength and conditioning coach, you are
Mhm.
probably going to be just completely underwhelmed. But let me tell you, this seems to work very well. I call it the meaty middle. And so, in terms of the fire service, we have like maybe they're 25% at the top, or they're going to thrive and be super healthy and do all the right things in spite of anything that I say. Then we
Mm.
have the 25% at the bottom who doesn't care. I could be like the NFL strength and conditioning coach of the century. They wouldn't care what I had to say anyway. The people that I can really impact are those people in the middle. And so this firefighter performance program is designed for those people in the middle. As I mentioned already, I try to make this as much as possible a choose your own adventure. And I also try to make it so the agency I work with right now has actually like the worst schedule out there. Like the research has
Mm.
been done. It is the worst schedule out there. So it's
Jesus. Okay.
one on, one off, one on, one off, one on, four off. And so they are constantly either waking up at the firehouse or waking up to go to the firehouse for those
Ugh,
one on, one off days. So,
God
um,
bless him.
right. And so I program everything on a playlist and I we go from there. So as we're looking through this, I we can we can probably agree that most people, when left to their own devices, are not going to warm up at all. So I provide them a super, super fast warm up, which I call the express warm up. I also provide them with what I call a full warm up. For me, this would be a more traditional, like ramp style warm up.
Hmm.
And it includes some, I kind of hate the word, but prehab exercises for, again, T, spine, low back, hips, ankles, all of those types of things.
Yeah.
Then I provide a main lift, a secondary lift, accessories, and some sort of a cardiovascular finisher. So when you look at this program, if you just opened up and scrolled down, you would be like, this is so overwhelming. But they do know that this is a choose your own adventure. So, Cooper, what do you got today? 35 minutes? Let's say you got 35 minutes. So, what I'm going to say is we're going to have Cooper do the express warm up because everyone should warm up regardless of
Hmm.
age and anything. Everyone should warm up. So I give them about 3 minutes of something on something, followed by, again, we know where those injuries are coming. So I want to make sure that we're moving their T spine, their hips, and their ankles. And then I always like to end the warm up with some sort of a pillar work, just so, okay, we've got abdominals that are maybe aware that something is going to go on. So for right now, we're going to skip the full warm up because Cooper doesn't have time. We're going to go to the main lift. So, excuse me. On this main lift for the pulling day is simply a trap bar deadlift. My firefighters know they can switch that up to kettlebell. They know they can switch that up to straight bar, rubber band. They know all of this. When I program for firefighters, again, we're not one rep maxing them ever, ever, ever. I always program reps in reserve.
Mm.
So I have to explain to them what that means. It's pretty simple. The explanation, they get it because I explain it kind of like the pain scale. When you're looking at a patient and saying on a scale of 0 to 10, are you in zero pain? Are you in a 10 out of 10 pain? All right, I want you to be able to do 5 repetitions. I am recommending that you have 2 to 3 in the tank when you are done. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the pain scale in some respects, and they
Hmm.
usually get it. And so, again, I mentioned that I do not program rest except on the main lift. So they're getting a minute of rest, which is maybe not optimal, but it's also compressing the amount of time that Cooper's spending doing his workout for the day. So I said he has 35 minutes. He did an express warm up, he did his main lift. So he knows through the fitness testing that we have done at the agency, he also knows that his VO2 max isn't super great. So we're going to finish up with a cardiovascular finisher. So on this particular day, through some research done by Dr. Katie Hirsch, what she found was that 1 minute super high intensity, 1 minute off for 10 rounds, so a total of 20 minutes, was quite effective in not only mobilizing visceral fat, but improving VO2 max, improving body composition. So here comes the research. When they ask, well, here we go. These are the issues that firefighters have. This 20-minute, if you can swing it, finisher is going to be perfect for you. Cooper's probably out of time, but I'm always going to recommend, of course, some sort of cool down stretch at the end.
Hmm.
Again, focusing on those muscle groups, those joints that are going to support the ability to, I would say, mitigate injury risk. We cannot prevent injuries. If you say that, you will always disappoint your agency. We mitigate the risk of injury.
Hmm. I love it. So one question I have, I guess, well, okay, two questions. First one is you're talking about a scenario in which RPE 10, RIR 0 is usually not attainable. But you are still educating people on like, okay, well, they have to get to X distance away from 0. So 1 rep in reserve, 2 reps in reserve, RPE 8, RPE 9. Like, I'm curious about how you're educating this population specifically on how to start to gauge that because I know it's subjective.
Mhm.
And for me personally, this is like a little bit of my coaching creeping in. It's like I know if I can get you to RPE 10 one time, RIR 0 one time on that variation, you will fucking know. So how do you like kind of coach around that? I want to get into a little bit of the art of coaching alongside this art of programming.
That is a wonderful question. And what the people that seem to not quite understand what I'm saying,
Hmm.
I'll ask them or I'll tell them, I'll advise them. Listen, the next time you put those weights on the bar and you think 285 is your 5 reps with 2 to 3 in reserve, go ahead and try to do, can you do 2 to 3 more? Can you do one more after that? How about one more after that? Okay, we need to
And then I
we need to
like that.
recalibrate.
I like that.
Yes.
The teaching them with the reps. It's like, hey, like fucker, if you can keep going, it's not heavy enough.
Well,
So I love
and the
that.
thing that I've started saying, Cooper, because I say it about a lot of things, it's not that serious. But
Yeah.
with training on firefighters, the thing that I always tell them is all of this shit is stupid made up. You know why it's stupid and made up? Because we don't work hard enough to move our bodies in the way that our bodies are supposed to move. So some jerk had to make up an elliptical, some jerk had to make up the Romanian deadlift, some jerk had to
Yeah.
make up the rear foot elevated split squat or whatever you want to call it. And coaches can argue about it, front squat, back squat, Zercher. It's not that serious.
Yeah.
Do some squatting, do some hinging,
Yeah.
do some
Yeah.
movement. It's not that serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Heard. And especially for this, general population and like where I think early on, just not being as mature as I am now as a coach, it was like, no, it has to be this, that, or the other, and it needs this specific thing for this specific outcome. But a lot of these people just aren't fucking consistent enough for that to matter anyway. So
Uh,
it's like, what's simple? What reduces cognitive load? What keeps them in the gym? What like where am I over explaining myself, too fucking much? And just confusing these people more. So
do you
I
want to talk
I
about periodization for a second?
I know your opinion on this, so please dive in.
Speaking of, it's not that effing serious. People are always like, how do you periodize for firefighters? I, I'm like, you can't. First of all, you can't because
Yeah.
unless you're training a firefighter for police and fire games or
Yeah.
world's strongest firefighter, you can't because you don't know when the event is. You have to continue to be pretty good at most of the stuff all the time. The other thing that's really sad is that they periodize themselves
Yeah.
because the thing that makes them really good firefighters, this sort of like type A, obsessive compulsive,
Hmm.
questioning everything, the thing that makes them good firefighters and keeps them alive makes them really, really difficult clients and patients because
Tough.
it
Yeah.
is all or nothing. There's nothing
Yep.
in the middle. There's no meaty middle. It's all or nothing. It's on the wagon or off the wagon. It's black, it's white. And so they are either adhering to the program or they are off the rails, drinking beer and fishing. They
Yeah.
periodize themselves. So
Yeah.
consistency, if I can teach them consistency, if I can get them to do something most of the time, that is a huge win with public safety.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, because I mean, it's such a different, and I think going back to like a question I know we wanted to come back to was like, hey, you've got like elite fire service units and such, that are doing like smoke jumpers or, any of the
Mhm.
laundry list of, incredible jobs that, you could be doing. But like that's not most people in the fire
Mhm.
service, right? And so, it's two really unique problems, I think. I also relate it to like special operations versus like, hey, you've got just like admin guys and gals, and like they could not be living any more different lives in the military, but they are still Marines, sailors, airmen, soldiers, and all those things. So I guess like to go back to that question, and I think useful to have the programming up with this is like once you've achieved that, what are you progressing towards? Like okay, you've got your 25% that are killing it. But now what are we working towards in that respect? Like, is it to go do these elite jobs? Is it to just like do a better job at what you're doing right now? Like how does that work and how does the programming evolve?
For most of the individuals, there aren't, if you stay within an agency, there probably aren't a lot of um, opportunities to go for like within the agency I work with, there is a special operations, which is
Yep,
a helicopter unit.
that's
Um,
badass. Cool.
yeah, isn't it cool? They have
Yeah.
something,
What do
it's
they
so
do? Like
wild.
what does a helicopter
Oh
unit
my
do?
God. They have a thing, it's called a Bambi bucket, which I thought they were picking up deer out of the river. Listen to
Uh-huh.
me. Nope, they scoop up water out of the river and then they fly to the wildland fire and drop the
Oh,
Bambi bucket on the fire.
that's super cool.
But they
I
do
love that.
search and rescue. They
Yeah.
do you know spotting. It's a joint operation between police and fire, so they do a lot of cool stuff.
Neat.
Um,
Super neat.
to my knowledge, and again, this is a blind spot for me because I haven't been at the agency that long, but I'm not certain about other physical requirements for that. What I do find with that 25% though is these are the women and men who are doing things like uh, marathon training. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
100-mile.
Powerlifting me and like,
Yes,
crazy stuff. Yeah.
we have on our agency the recent winner of both the deadlift and the bench press, I think, at World Police and Fire Games, like pretty wild.
Unit. Yeah, that's awesome.
So, or Cooper, they might be on the elite Fire Ferrets rowing team as
Hell
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For
They
those
might
that
be on
don't
it.
know, which I don't think anyone would know, but Annette
No,
is
it's,
on a competitive rowing team with some of the other firefighters. We talked about it a lot before we got on the call this morning. It's pretty cool.
I'm very excited about the Fire Ferrets. No, but I think
So,
that to speak to your question, I think that getting getting these women and men to the finish line of their career with a health span
yeah.
left because the book I'm sorry is Michael Easter, The Comfort Crisis, and he
Hmm.
talks
Hmm.
about our lifespan is longer than it's ever been and our
Hmm.
health span is shorter than it's ever been. So
Hmm.
especially in a job where you don't get adequate sleep, where your nutrition suffers, where your mental health might be impacted a little bit, getting your health span to last your lifespan is an absolute huge win for me.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. No, and I love thinking about that. Like, because I know my grandfather-in-law talks about, with some health problems, like just he's like body's a prison, sometimes. Like he's like as he ages is how he described it. And I'm like, oh my God, like that is not how, you want it to be. And yeah, that health window is a really unique way of looking at that. So yeah, I
Mm.
appreciate some of the clarity around that. Now, one question I have is around progressions. When obviously like you get into these lifts and these are fast, rapid fire, in and out in like 30 minutes or whatever. And I'm curious, like, what does better look like from a calculus of that, like week to week, month to month, year to year improvement?
So for right now, this is a new program at the agency.
Okay.
It's a new program for me. It's a new program for all of these firefighters. So part of that is I don't know yet, Cooper. We're just trying to get
Hmm.
our 300 seats filled.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, I filled many of them yesterday afternoon when I stopped I shouldn't say many, several of them when I stopped at that firehouse.
Good
But
job. It's
yeah,
good
thanks.
buy-in. Yep.
But you know how it works at the firehouse? There's this thing called jealousy. If one person has something, other people want it. And so that's how things like this grow. So I just offer it to Cooper and he's like, yeah, whatever. But if Cooper sees someone else having it, then he wants it.
Mm,
So
hmm. Hmm.
we have a lot of I'm going to talk around your question and probably not answer it that well, but we
Okay.
have a lot of things coming on the horizon where we're trying to make some really good improvements, starting at the academy level. We're currently looking at some Connex boxes because right now our
Nice.
academy has dumbbells and kettlebells and a few sandbags and a couple sleds, and they're all kept outside. And we have some cardio equipment as well, but there really wasn't any progressive strength and conditioning programming prior. It was just kind of like random acts of fitness. And so we're going to try to get that really, really dialed in as far as programming goes,
Yeah.
and then get that set from the academy so that the expectation is we have this program, we have this delivery. I've learned how to squat and deadlift and shoulder press and all of these things at the academy. I've also been taught how to integrate this into my lifestyle. And hopefully that's going to keep marching forward. In terms of right now, the programming that I have out is pretty simple. I have Firefighter Performance. I'm pretty proud of this name. Should I say it out loud? Because I don't want you guys to steal it. Okay, I'll tell you. VO2 Maximizer. I have a mobility program,
Cool.
and I've been actually sharing the West Side Barbell programming with a few people.
Nice.
But obviously, once we start building out more programs, we'll be
Hmm.
able to sort of streamline it a little bit. But the big thing that we're using it for right now is in our fitness testing. If we find someone whose, say, body composition or VO2 max isn't optimal, then we're able to offer this to them as well
Hmm.
as have a peer fitness trainer work with them. So, again, this is very new, but this is the way I've been programming for a
Yeah.
really long time.
I love that. Well, and I think you articulate the story of this program really, really well. And I think that it's clear why for this population you've made these decisions and it's built around their
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle. Right. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something like we can all like kind of always be doing better. You know what I mean? Is like making sure that like we understand whether it's clients, athletes, like whoever, that we really just understand like the left and right boundaries of their life right now and how we need to fill performance in those gaps. Because to your point, like how many people are like, if the workout's not an hour long, it didn't count, and yet you just
Not that
showed,
serious.
yeah, not that serious, extreme density, like several of my lifts during the week, like if I am choosing to go in like a morning slot, it's like I might just go in and kind of be blasting through like a handful of machines, just like boom, 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 like to get the day in. I might not even do free weights that day. You know what I mean? And the amount of progress you can get, I feel like just like personally speaking from my anecdotal experience, but also like the experience of my athletes, like with just these little hits, it's like what's 2 hours? Okay, like great, you did 1 2 hour session this week. If you did 30 minutes every day when you have these gaps, that's like way more time under tension that you're getting, way more
Yeah.
time with your heart rate pounding. So I really love your approach. And I know you undercut yourself a little bit. It's so stupid simple, right? But that's art though. You know what I mean? And it's a great story from point A to point B that you're telling with your programming. So I really appreciate you showing that.
Well, and I think that it's important to know whether you're collegiate, professional, high school,
Hmm.
little league,
Yeah.
military, it's really important to know your population. So I have 20 years of experience in the fire service, but
Hmm.
you don't need 20 years in the service to know how to relate to firefighters. It's just like everything else. Show them how much you care, keep your damn mouth shut, ask a lot of questions about them, and don't start volunteering information until they ask you. So again, I have 20 years in the fire service, but this agency, the firefighters probably really don't care. What they do know though is that I'm going to come in, I'm going to be respectful, I'm going to ask questions, and I'm not going to volunteer a bunch of advice until they actually
Hmm.
ask. Now, when they ask, the dam opens up and
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
long conversation. I was late for a conversation with Cooper yesterday because the dam opened up, but that's how you deal with
Those
this
are the best
population.
conversations though. You know what I mean? Like going deep with the people you love working with. That's the best. It's the whole
Right.
point.
Exactly. And then to the other point, and this might be just people, I just haven't dealt with any other population for so long. You can give them your phone number, you can give them your email, your Instagram. Heck, they could pull a box alarm. Um, but they won't ask you a question until you are in the station. And
Hmm.
then you've got 20 people lined up with a question that could have been an email 3 months ago. So you have to make appearances at the station as much
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, that I find in the modern world, a lot of coaches resist that like time of showing your face from a buy-in perspective. But that's where all the magic happens, man, is in person. It's, I love online training for like what it,
Mm,
can provide a coach in terms of like flexibility of lifestyle and such. But
yeah.
like you gotta like, be face to face, at least in some capacity in my mind. It keeps you sharp, but it also keeps you like so highly engaged with like it's your thumb on the pulse,
Yeah.
in the best way possible. So I love that. I love that.
And they have to make sure you pass the sniff test too.
For
And
sure.
they can't tell you that over an email or a message.
Nope. Yeah, no, heck no, right? No, no, no way. Yeah, the what is the sniff test amongst firefighters? I'm curious if there's any variance there between high school
Um,
football or, tactical or whatever it might be.
their bullshitometer is calibrated really precisely.
Yep.
And so I think you have to be really genuine. And
Mm-hmm.
I think being humble is it's a good thing in any situation, but
Sure.
genuine and humble, I think. And then just be willing to say when you don't know. He
Yeah.
had gone down this rabbit hole the other day about it started on peptides, it transitioned to creatine, unrelated, and then he one of the guys pulled out a supplement. I just like, yeah, I'm a sports nutritionist, but I can't know every single one. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
it's like
know. What do you know?
gorilla backflips, 666. It's like, oh, cool. I don't know what that is, man. Like, I have no idea what that is. Like,
I mean, I'm like, yeah, let me write it down. I'll
yeah.
check it out, but tell me what
Look at the
you
label.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
wild.
funny. So funny. Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, I kind of want to wrap us up with a question about like the future, right? And what we're kind of leaning into from a perspective of like you just launched, probably one of like the like most grand projects in terms of, getting these people to start to take their health and fitness seriously. But like what are you seeing come down the pipeline over the next 3 years, 5 years, decade, however long you want to scope out to that's going to change this stuff for the better?
I think that the fire service is becoming much more open to research. When I started in the early 2000s, it was all dogma based. And actually, I was standing on the front lawn of a fire, holding a hose, getting ready to go in one day, and thinking, I'm going to get killed because what the chief is saying is not right. I know it's not right. I have 5 minutes of experience, but from a physics standpoint, this is not right.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, he was not right. But I think that the fire service is a lot more open to research. I think a lot of labs are doing some really good research. I think that some events are helping to disseminate the research in a better way. But I think the shortcoming still is that people primarily reading the fire research are other researchers. So we have to get that into the hands of the
Mm,
men and women that it really matters. And the problem is there aren't a lot of people that speak in a way that we talked about before that tells the story. I always think of it this way. I don't want to convince you, Cooper, to take creatine. I'm just going to tell you a story in a way that is interesting enough to you where you might want to give a shit. And then
hmm.
I'm just going to let you go and make your own decision. And so we need more people telling the story of the research in a way that firefighters give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that relatability element, I think it's unique because I know someone asked a question and we'll kind of dive into the, the Q&A from what folks asked, but like how do you do this? You know what I mean? Like learn the lingo and I think I know the answer here. But someone no firefighting experience, that wants to help, support this absolute necessity for our society to function.
So I have a new person in my lab who actually
Mhm.
asked me, he's like, AZ, do you think I should go get it like be a firefighter, get a job as a firefighter, volunteer so I understand. I'm like, no. What I think you need to do is create a relationship. It's all about relationships. You need to
Yep.
create a relationship with an agency who will allow you to maybe not initially do a ride along, but come in for a couple hours, observe what they're doing, ask questions like how much does that piece of equipment weigh? Can I hold on to it? What do you do with it? What is the hardest part of your job? Is it difficult for you to step down off of that rig wearing that gear? Can I try it on? Would that be okay? Like ask questions because firefighters love to talk about their job. They don't necessarily want to hear about what you're an expert in. They don't care, but they love to talk about their job.
Hmm.
So, much like any sport,
Yeah,
I
100%.
probably would not be the best strength and conditioning coach for, say, baseball or
Sure.
volleyball, but I
Yeah.
could figure it out through a needs analysis, asking questions, watching what's going on.
Yeah.
So, the key is you can't be an annoying a-hole. So
Hmm.
be a good, approachable person and ask if you can observe and maybe eventually move on to doing a ride along. And some agencies have citizens fire academies, which is really cool. So if you live in,
Yeah.
say, Destin, Florida, go on the Destin, Florida website and see if they have citizens fire academies or open houses or things like that. Super helpful.
That's neat. Yeah, and I think this question gets asked pretty often, like regardless of what industry someone's a part of when, we have them on the show. And I think like the through line that I'm starting to see across all the answers is that like you might have no clue the like all the little detail stuff, but like it's almost like learning a language. The best way to do it is going to the country and like having it kind of like, thrown at you and stress you out a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to be present and to try is more than 95% of people are willing to do anyway. So like
Yeah.
by being there and just being like curious, inquisitive, asking questions and like just, like you said, not being an asshole about it. It's like it's pretty straightforward, so I love that response. And yeah, hopefully like the more episodes I do with this, the more I want to be able to relate it back to that. Like you're speaking to something a lot of coaches are speaking to, which is just go get your hands dirty and like believe in yourself and believe in the people around you. So I love that.
And I think too, you just have to be like a good dude or a good dudette. So I
Yeah.
was down at our training facility, our academy yesterday, and there wasn't an academy going on. We went to speak to someone, and they were unloading a semi with water pallets with a forklift, and one of the water pallets like exploded. Like not the
Yeah.
waters, but the actual cases. And so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
athletic
Yeah.
trainer and I just like rolled up our sleeves, got
All
in there,
right.
started moving water. And
Yep.
that goes a long ways. Just be a good dude.
Love that. Love that. Now, there were a lot of questions about wearables. So I apologize to everyone who asked something very specific, but I think the smartest way to answer this is just to like hear your thoughts about implementing this in the fire service.
That is a great question. I saw someone too, again, my ADHD, I saw someone asked about, yes, this is an Aura ring.
I like it. I
And
like the
that
color.
is, yeah, it's a rubber thingy. The Aura ring is actually my current favorite wearable because as an end user, I find that the data it gives me is the most granular and meaty. You
Mm-hmm.
guys, this is embarrassing. I'm also wearing a Whoop. The reason I'm wearing a Whoop is because my agency before I started, chose to put that on the recruits. And it's part of my research project. And I'm kind of frustrated with Whoop right now, trying to get my data from them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started wearing one just so I could understand better. Now, with the Whoop, there's a huge advantage over the Aura Ring if you have an agency. And that advantage is they have a dashboard where you can see all of your athletes on one dashboard. I don't know of any other wearable where you can do that. So that's a huge advantage. But also for me, that's not data. That is black box, um, hardly useful, that dashboard stuff. So
Yeah.
again, and I was involved in a study on the Aura Ring, which again, the data is much more granular. It's much more useful, at least the data you can get. And then I also have a Polar, which I've been wearing forever. You guys are going to think I'm a freak. I wear the Polar because, again, I've been wearing it forever. I have 25 years of polar flow data on that, and I just think it's interesting. So with the wearables, I want to know, what is your goal? What is your goal with a wearable? Is
Mm-hmm.
it to
Mm-hmm.
educate the person that's wearing it? Is it to inform your training? Is it to, what is it for? And that's how I would break down which wearable that I might potentially choose. If, again, the only thing that I can warn you, if you are doing actual research, it is excessively difficult to get that data from Whoop right now.
Interesting. That's fascinating stuff. I mean, we get on the bridge side of things, like get asked all the time, "Hey, will you ever integrate? Like, what will you, do?" And it's just like one, it's really freaking hard to build that out. It's crazy expensive, and a lot of time no one really does anything with the data anyway besides throw it into a dashboard, like you're saying, the,
Hmm.
the black box here. I would like to ask a follow-up to that in
Yeah.
relation to like what do you mean by the black her master's in biostatistics? So I hear about this stuff and like am learning, drinking from the fire hose of, just being around her about statistics and how we kind of evolve these things. So like what do you mean that data is not useful in that black box? And like what data are we really trying to dive into? What's valuable? Because I think that's a lot of things that like strength coaches hear that, and it might be very simple to you guys, but as someone who's like not good at statistics at all, I'm like, wait, hold on, like I think this is important. So can you dive into that like 101 stuff for us real quick?
Yes, I would love to. And full disclosure, I am probably not the best neither statistician nor wearable person. But when
Sure.
I say black box, Whoop in particular has what they call a strain score. And when the agency was buying the wearables, I asked the salesperson, I'm like, what does that mean? What does it take into account? No one can or will explain it to me what the strain score is. Um,
Yep.
in
Yep.
fact, it recently came to my attention that their algorithm for sleep might actually be a little bit,
Off.
it's reporting more REM sleep than I think is actually possible in some
Hmm.
people.
And
Like,
I know because we did this as part of our tactical convergence that like the most accurate for the sleep stuff is Aura, without a doubt.
yeah,
Whereas like Garmin and Polar are the most accurate for like heart rate data if you have the
yeah,
strap. Like, and so yeah, continue.
yeah. So, in terms of the dashboard, I could look at Cooper's output and go, okay, at 10:01, his heart rate was 158. At 10:02, it was 163, whatever. Minute by minute heart rate does nothing for me in terms of calculating heart rate variability, in terms
Hmm.
of calculating responses. And so, I mean, I need the data, the real data that they use to put into the algorithms to get those numbers. That's what's useful for me. And I mean, I know there is a way to get it, but each individual person has to set up an API,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah,
just a whole thing.
it's a
And
lot of
so
steps.
it's a lot of steps. But in terms of wearables, though, again, if we're using it to inform and educate ourselves and also not getting obsessive about it, because
Hmm.
that is a thing, and we're focusing on one wearable and comparing apples to apples, I think
Hmm.
that any of them will work. Garmin,
Yeah. Yeah.
Polar, whatever. But gosh, I love the Aura
Yeah,
ring.
yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I'm in the market to get one soon here, just for the sleep stuff to get really accurate with that because it's something I track pretty religiously, and feel like I'm not getting the best out of my Garmin watch, at times. But this is again, it's just like what you wear, how you do it, like because I move all over the place when I sleep, which means all watches suck for me. Like I'll like literally like lift the thing half off my wrist, right, while I'm sleeping because I'm tossing and turning. So it's cool. I really like I love what you're kind of saying about that. Like, especially just understanding like if you keep one wearable, it's the change over time
Mhm.
with that, consistent measure that we're really looking for. So yeah, I appreciate you diving deeper into that. Cool. Annette, what else you got for us? And like how can we kind of follow along with you as you're going through your research?
Well, I did want to mention to you that even although I've only had my Whoop band for less than a week, I am currently leading the agency in sleep and recovery
Let's
because
go.
sleep is my thing.
Yeah.
Um, my My PhD has been a little bit non-traditional because usually you propose your research and then you take your comps and then you collect your data. Well, I already collected my data about
Hmm.
2 months ago. It was a tremendous opportunity. So we're looking at stress responses in recruits along with heart
Mm.
rate. I hope if I ever get the data from Whoop with body composition and performance
Hmm.
metrics and things like that. So super exciting. As in terms of following along, I used to be much better on Instagram, but you can go ahead and
Me
find me
too.
over at Fire Rescue Wellness. But I do have, if you go to my website, I have a newsletter. I send out a newsletter on a weekly basis. But
Yeah.
other than that, if you have questions, you're probably best to email me. I tossed that up a little bit ago, but maybe Cooper can put it in the chat again.
Sure. Was it info at Fire Rescue Wellness? Okay.
Info.org. Yep.
I'll type it into the chat so people can copy and paste. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, I used to be a lot faster getting back to people, but as it turns out, it the PhD is kind of busy. So
One would think, that you got all this stuff going on, and you're like, why don't I throw a PhD in the mix? It's impressive.
uh,
We're big fans of the way Annette approaches research and life
it's
over here at Bridge.
it's firefighter all or nothing, go or stop.
Yeah, yep,
If you
100%.
are attending FDIC, the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indy in April, I'm
Hmm.
going to be there with some of my besties
Awesome.
presenting on sleep. My topic is on sleep, and I'm also giving a little talk on creatine, my favorite supplement. So,
Best. How much did you take
best.
this morning?
I do a relative instead of
Mhm.
absolute, so I took 10 grams.
Beautiful. I love it. I took
Yeah,
16. Feels
point
good.
0.1 grams per kilogram on me. Yeah,
Hell yeah. I
yeah,
love it. It works.
that's
I know
right.
you preach the word of creatine on your social media often, and I know some of the new research with some of the bigger doses has been coming around the block a little bit, and I'm like I've tried a few times, especially when I've lost sleep, and I think
Yes.
subjectively it works.
I mean,
Research is cool like that. I think you know.
the data are compelling. It does
Yep.
help in acute sleep deprivation. And we didn't
Yep.
really talk about nutrition, but um, yeah, that's a big thing in fire too. So,
100%. Beautiful.
yeah,
Well, folks, thanks for making the time today. As always, the mission of Unracked is to, get wonderful coaches, researchers, practitioners like Annette on the show to give you guys, tip of the spear information here. And, Annette, I had a ton of fun today. And thank you so much for, being a part of this. So very grateful.
absolutely. It was wonderful to be here. I appreciate you all. Thanks for coming.
Excellent, folks. Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here today. All right. Take care. See y'all.